on a side note, it's so exciting to see the belt on this because I haven't had the belt on it before, and I feel like that completes it. Hi YouTube! Today I wanted to talk about what people in my story wear. I will be using a format created by Mariah Patty, and she did a clothing my fantasy race. Mine is not a race, but rather they're just people that live in a fantasy world. But if you want to see her videos on that, I will link it in the description below. Hers is a lot better than mine, but I am going to try my best. She has a chart format that she uses, which I've already written out, and I will follow as I show you. But I also have actually sewn and created my MC's signature dress, which I will be sharing with you guys with the help of the lovely dress form Fredwina. And I'm really excited to show that to you guys. I've been wanting to show it to you for a while now, just waiting for the right opportunity. And this seems like the right opportunity. So let's get into it. And I will show you what people in my story wear. Okay, so this is the chart that Mariah Patty came up with. And in the middle you have what inspired you to make it this way. So I wrote medieval, a little tiny dash of steampunk, actually Disney/21st century silhouettes, and then I also like the idea of competing seamstresses and designers existing within a medieval era, because that's something that exists now that it could have existed in history, but in a fantasy setting, it's more likely to have existed. And then the general baseline is people wear leather boots. They have cotton or linen undergarments. They have a mid-layer, like a shirt, or I should say a tunic or a dress, and then a overlayer, such as vests, jackets, or an overdress or a surcoat. And so that will depend. And then she divides it into several different categories, which I've highlighted. So formal and upper class, lower class, and work clothes. And these lines are dotted because those are somewhat connected. And then you have adult, child, winter, summer, modern and traditional, male and female. And so those are the categories, each one obviously having their opposite. There's a lot of notes here, and you don't have to worry about trying to read all of this on my page. I will have a close-up image where you can read this at the end of the video, and you can pause it and look at that. But I have created paper dolls, basically. And so let's do the female one first, because that's the one I have the most fun with imagining. Typical female, we'll just start with the female section here. So they'll always have a chemise, drawers, and stockings, which I have drawn on. So she's got her stockings. The chemise, I just did a little silhouette of at the bottom. I didn't draw it much at the top because it'll depend on if she's wearing a corset or not as to whether that would be looser or tighter. Drawers, I know in actual medieval times, and I was inspired a lot by 14th century medieval times, because medieval spans centuries. They would have split drawers, but for the sake of my book and decency, I want them to have closed drawers, because there is a scene where the princess strips off her dress and dives into a river in just her chemise and drawers. and I don't want that to be super open in that scene. Okay, so starting with lower class, and for a lot of these I did lots of separate pieces, and the rest of them I did not color. But starting with lower class, there would be 3 pieces typically, and that would be the dress, which I've drawn in blue, the surcoat, which I've drawn in yellow, and the apron, which I've left white. And then hair is really fun in my story. Single women will not have their hair cut, so they'll have long hair. But if you're married, you'll typically braid your hair, and I could see it being fashionable to change that braid and where that's at based on how you're feeling about your husband. So if your husband is a jerk, you might wear your hair, your braid a little bit more hidden as kind of a statement against your husband to try and get him to be better. I don't know if you can see the braid is hidden there, whereas right here it's prominent. I'm not personally good at drawing braids or braiding my own hair, but I imagine that in this fantasy world, in Behanandra, not in the whole fantasy world because there's several different cultures, but I'm only going to focus on Behanandra. They would have fancier hair and stuff. The other thing is lower class women would wear boots, usually taller boots for working, and they would have their sleeves rolled up. And these lower class women would prefer the surcoats because it would be easier and less expensive than having a corset, but it would provide that layer that they would want help with the female form. And then in winter time, and this is going to be the same for upper and lower class, in winter time women would wear cloaks, and we'll just pretend I still put her hair on there, but they would wear cloaks to stay warm. That is the key winter thing that people wear. And so, yeah. And then I do have some characters that are pregnant, and during pregnancy they would usually bind their breasts with just some cotton, and then they would wear the surcoat and the dress. And this is the one time that the upper class would dress more similarly, but they would probably have fancier sleeves, which I'll talk about in a second. But that is the only time they would wear surcoats. Of course, it would be made out of finer material. Typically, for a upper class woman, they would wear shorter laced-up boots unless they were horseback riding, which the main character, the princess, starts her adventure and she leaves the kingdom right after having gone horseback riding, so she is wearing her taller boots. And then on top of their chemise, and this is the same for formal as well, they would have a crinoline, whether that was, or hoop skirt, however you want to say it, and that could be just made out of stiff material, lots of layers of material, or it could be made out of whatever process they want. They might have actual hoops in there. It depends on the noblewoman and the resources she has available to her. I'm just taking that away because I forgot that the dress needed to match the crinoline silhouette. So on top of the crinoline, they would have their dress. It would be longer than the crinoline. And of course, the crinoline would push the sides out. I forgot to do that when I made the paper doll things, but that's okay because on top of this first layer of dress, they'll have an overdress. Oh, I forgot a layer. They will also have the corset. Where did my little paper corset go? I found it. Okay, so I'm just going to take the crinoline away. We can pretend it's there. They would have the corset on top, and this is where that steampunk, little dash of steampunk inspiration came from, because traditionally, and basically every time period, women would not wear their stays or their corset over. But I really like the steampunk look where the corset's on top, but I don't want it completely on top. I just want it to peek out and say, hello, I exist. So they will wear their overdress on the top. And I feel like this will make more sense. Let's give her some hair. Let's make her a happy married woman with her braid prominently showing. So this will make more sense when I show you my actual sewn example of my MC's dress. And so this is what they would wear formally. And then the very last thing that I want to show you is royalty would wear a ringlet crown that just goes over their head and then down onto their forehead. So that is what women in my world would wear. And yeah, I'll get to show you a real life example that I've actually designed and sewn myself, and I'm really excited to show you that. Alright, so men will start with their stockings and their drawers. They don't have an undershirt. I guess they could if they wanted to, but I don't think it would be very common. The next thing they would put on would of course be their pants. So let's give this little guy some pants. And then on top of that, he would have a tunic. And I like tunics in my story because I like the idea of hiding that middle area, and because women would have that hidden, and I think men in this world would have that hidden as well. And then they might wear a vest. Now the vest will change depending on two things, either age or season. Typically men will wear a closed vest, but young men, and sometimes in the summer, grown men will wear an open vest. And it's really just that layering that's very important in their culture. Now, the men's fashion here I took mostly from fantasy, seeing as in the Middle Ages and in the 14th century and for a long time, men typically just wore a looser version of what the women wore, and men did wear dresses. I can actually link a video about that below by Shadiversity, so I will be linking that. And then in the winter time, instead of a vest, they would have a jacket on top, and of course the sleeves from the tunic would get tucked into the jacket, but can't really do that with paper as much. Men would always be wearing tall boots with their pants tucked into them. And then the fashion for men's hair would typically be long, but not all the way to their shoulders. They would want to cut it a couple inches above their shoulders, just below their ears. And so that's where their haircuts would be. And then the other thing they would usually add to an outfit is a belt. And then, of course, if it was very cold, raining, or snowing, they would wear a cloak as well. The exception to the long hair would be anyone who works, or any men who work with food. Women would have their hair pulled back. While the only married women braid their hair, other women can wear their hair pulled up and pulled back. But if someone were to be working with food, they would have shorter hair, just because of hygiene. And a lot of people think that people in the Middle Ages didn't know or care about hygiene. They just had different practices. They did have a certain understanding of it, but it is nowhere near as detailed or scientific as our current understanding. Now, during a formal event, a man would still wear his vest, but he would typically wear a fake gambeson or a quilted vest to look fancy. And then on top of that, let's see, this isn't a worker now, this is a nobleman, because he's going to a fancy event, so we'll give him some longer hair, because he would not be working in the kitchens. We'll give him his belt, and he might wear a side cape to a formal event. There we go. Because that would be the fashion for going to formal events. And then if he were royalty, he would wear a more masculine ringlet on his head. And so that it would be a nobleman, or someone going to a formal party, which usually only the nobles are going to end up at. Let's see. If the man were working, he would probably, if he was working hard, he would probably roll his sleeves up. Or if he were younger, he might not wear a shirt at all. What other caveats do I have here on my chart? Oh yes, elderly men would wear, once a man's children reach marrying age, they would usually wear a beard and not shave anymore. An exception to that would be the king would always wear a beard. And then, let's put his hair back on. The other thing that you would probably see would be priests who wear robes, and they also have bracelets, and those are their prayer bracelets, and they have a rosary, and on this rosary is symbols of the moon and the sun with a star in the middle. And that would be what a priest would wear. So, yeah, let's see. Other things I didn't include would be uniforms, and guards would wear gambeson and mail, and soldiers would wear gambeson, mail, and plate armor, which I'm not going to make. And arming swords would be preferred, spears second, and bows third. Of course, they would have other weapons, just those would be the most prominent and preferred weapons. I did forget to show you something with the women, and that would be some of the younger or more daring women would not have sleeves, and they would show their shoulders, but their corsets would still hold their dress up, and they would, if they were to dress in this fashion, they would, I'm covering it with my hand, sorry. If they were to dress in this fashion, their shoulders would be showing. The other thing I forgot to include is that in this world, different seamstresses and designers would be competing to have their outfits stand out the most, and noble women, of course, want to stand out from each other. And the way they would do that is the sleeves. All of the sleeves would be unique and different according to who designed them or what the noble woman has asked for. So you might get puff sleeves, and you might get open draping sleeves. And then in the winter time, the women would have their sleeves, but their overdress, this part, and of course the peasant woman would just wear longer sleeves and cloaks, but the overdress that the noble woman would wear would have detachable sleeves that they could use eyelets to connect and go over the sleeves of the dress. So while this would be like not have anything on the shoulders, it would go out and have sleeves that come down. Whether those are long sleeves or flowing sleeves or puffed bell sleeves or whatever, would be up to the person, because that would be kind of the competing look. So yeah, that is what people would wear in my world. Again, I will have a close-up of this chart at the end of the video if you want to look at it closer. I highly suggest you go to the original video where this chart was made so you can go and see a computerized version of it for yourself. So now I just want to show you the dress that I made for my MC.